That's right, Rochelle. We're going to get some insight and analysis on China's GDP with Anthony Chan. He is the chief economist for Chase. Anthony, good to see you again.
Good to be here.
Anthony, China's GDP coming in at 6.7%, the slowest growth, quarterly growth in 7 years. What's your initial reaction? Was this in line with your expectations?
It definitely was in line with my expectations, because what we've seen in recent months is that the Chinese have been adding tons of stimulus, whether it be monetary policy, whether it be fiscal policy, to try to get this economy re-energized. And I think mission was accomplished in the first quarter.
Well, let's break down the numbers a little bit, because the service sector growth there slowed from 8.2% to 7.6%. Now, given the aim is to transition towards a consumer-based, service-based economy, is it a concern or is it just a minor slowdown?
It's a temporary concern, because a nutritionist tells us that we have to eat healthy every day because we'll have a long life. But if you have a near-death experience and you're in the hospital in critical condition, nutrition is the secondary objective. Saving the patient's life is the important objective. Here, with the economy facing a near-death experience, at the beginning of the year, people were so concerned. What did the Chinese do? They stimulated the economy.
Was it facing a near-death experience, or was that just exaggerated concerns from the global markets?
I think if you look at the data in January and February, you did see a significant slowdown. What you saw is that the first quarter came in strong, but it was back-end loaded. You saw a lot of the numbers, whether it be retail sales, whether it be industrial production, whether it be fixed asset investment, all of them coming in very strong in March. They were not so strong in the beginning of the year.
Well, to your point, there were some upside surprises in real estate and in infrastructure. But is this a good thing? Because it looks like it's the old-styled credit-backed type of growth and recovery.
Well, Michelle, I agree with you. It is not a good thing if they continue to do this indefinitely. But when the economy is sort of at a standstill and there's a crisis, you have to stimulate the economy. You're absolutely spot on, because when you look at state-owned enterprises or state-owned fixed asset investment, that was growing almost 4 times faster than private fixed asset investment from the private sector. So we want to see that restructuring, but we want to stabilize economic growth before we do that.
So, as you're saying, the government stepped in with the paddles, if you will, to jolt the economy back into life, and it has certainly done so. One of the bright spots, consumer spending, retail sales up 10.5% in March. How do we keep that momentum going?
I think you keep that momentum growing by continuing to stimulate the economy, build consumer confidence, try to minimize how many jobs are lost, or in fact, if they are lost, to try to shift those workers into other professions. We already have some indication that's taking place, but we'll need to do a lot more, especially if the Chinese government is going to phase out a lot of that excess capacity in the old sector economy and move it into the new sectors.
And is that where the process of urbanization comes into play?
That is exactly where it is. And in fact, over the next 3 to 5 years, the Chinese government has to absolutely move in that direction, but not over the near term.
You know, Anthony, 6.7%, a good number. But people say that the way that China is calculating its GDP is outdated, and that it doesn't reflect new sectors of the economy like technology, like IT, and that the way it needs to be calculated should be revised. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I absolutely agree. In fact, most countries have problems with their GDP. Even the United States, believe it or not, is starting to get some criticism that when you see economic activity and job creation so strong, that the real GDP numbers are not reflecting it. Every decade, the world changes, the economies change, and it's no different in China than it is in other parts. Absolutely. India actually recently renovated the way they estimate GDP. I think the Chinese should follow suit.
They revised it back in 2013. There's another revision due in 2018. What do you expect would be included then?
Well, remember that as they make these revisions, they also have to measure things a lot more accurately. And right now, the technology sector is undercounted. And so as you move into 2018, it's not so much that the number gets stronger, it becomes more accurate, and that's what you want.
Is Beijing still on track to meet its 6.77% GDP target growth for this year?
I have no doubt, because when you look at Chinese loans, when you look at total social finance, the broadest measure of loan, total social finance now went to a new record. And we know that the loans are growing at a very rapid clip.
But we've
the money
also had
supply is growing very rapidly.
non-performing loans.
The non-performing loans is a side effect because when you continue to grow credit at twice the speed of the overall economy, you know that that's a negative side effect.
So what could derail this? What could derail hitting that target of 7%?
I think one of the things that could derail that is if the global economy slows down a lot more than the International Monetary Fund projects. The International Monetary Fund did revise down global GDP, but to 3.2%. And by the way, last year was 3.1%. So it's still a little bit stronger. If that number gets a lot weaker and Chinese exports continue to be under pressure, that can derail it.
The IMF also revising China's GDP upwards at the same time.
Very positive development to 6.5% from 6.3%. That was a positive development, again, reflecting all the stimulus that's in the pipeline.
How are small and medium enterprises being impacted by all of this?
At this point, we are not paying enough attention to small and medium enterprises in China. We absolutely need to move in that direction. The Chinese government knows that. But in this period where there was fear of a hard landing, they went back to the old industries. That's one of the reasons why industrial production is so strong. And in fact, we are even seeing quite an amount of strength in the housing sector, which we know we already have excess capacity. So we don't necessarily want to see that much activity there either.
Anthony, the China growth slowdown has been a big concern for markets around the globe. Does today's data alleviate some of those worries?
I think today's numbers alleviates a lot of that concern, but more importantly, it's not even the GDP numbers that makes me feel more comfortable. It's that March data that came in. Cement production growing more than 20% on a year-over-year basis. That is telling me that economic activity is starting to re-energize in China.
Anthony, you seem very energized about these numbers. Always good to have you. Anthony Chan, Chief Economist for Chase.